The poor girl climbed on a stool to clean the millionaire's Porsche. But when she said, "I need money for my twin brothers, milk," he burst into tears. The sun peeked through the cracks of the faded curtains when Ellie opened her eyes. The small apartment was already quiet, which was strange. Usually the twins made noise first thing in the morning. She rubbed her eyes with her little hands and jumped out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor. "Mommy!" she called, dragging her stuffed rabbit down the hallway. Rachel was in the kitchen, trying to calm one of the twins in her arms, while the other whimpered on the floor, banging an old spoon. Her face not only looked tired, but also worried. "Good morning, princess." "I'm hungry," Ellie said, climbing onto a stool to reach the table. Rachel sighed deeply. "We have a piece of bread from yesterday, but—" She opened the fridge, and Ellie peeked under her mother's arm. The dim light revealed completely empty shelves, just a jar with a tiny bit of jam left. "Where's the milk?" Ellie asked, frowning. "It's all gone, sweetie. Everything's gone. We can share the bread, but we don't have anything else for today." Ellie looked at her 1-year-old brothers. They were thinner than they should be and cried more than they used to. Their blue baby bottles were empty next to the sink. The babies looked at her with big, hungry eyes. "But Tommy and Ben need milk." "They're little," Ellie said. Rachel put the twin she was holding down next to his brother and sat at the table, running a hand over her face. "I know, sweetie, I know." Her voice broke. "Today—" She couldn't finish. Ellie knew that look. It was the same one she had when the rent was late and the angry man knocked on the door. It was the look from when Rachel would count coins late at night, only to put them all back in the empty drawer. Breakfast was silent and sad. Rachel gave the twins warm water in their bottles, and they cried for a while before falling asleep, still hungry. Ellie nibbled on a small piece of the hard bread, leaving the rest for her mother, who refused it. "You need to eat, you're growing," Rachel said, pushing the bread back toward Ellie. After breakfast, Rachel sat the three of them on the worn-out rug in the living room with the few toys they had. "I'm going to take a quick shower, and then I'm going to look for some work again, okay? Ellie, watch your little brothers for a bit." Ellie nodded seriously. She was the big sister, Mommy's helper. When Rachel closed the bathroom door and the sound of the shower started, Ellie looked at the twins, who were now sleeping lightly, their bellies rumbling. "You guys need to eat," she murmured, stroking the babies' heads. She remembered the lady from the downstairs apartment, who sometimes gave coins to the building's kids when they washed her old car. "If you work, you earn money," the lady had once explained, "and with money, you buy what you need." An idea sparked in Ellie's mind. She looked at the closed bathroom door, then at the sleeping twins. The grocery store was just 2 blocks away. She had been there many times with her mum. Silently, Ellie grabbed her little coat, worn out at the elbows, hanging near the door. She opened the drawer of the entryway table where her mom kept the keys and hoped to find a few coins. There were only 2 small coins, worth almost nothing. She took them anyway and put them in her pocket. "I'll be right back," she whispered to the sleeping twins. "I'm going to get you some food." She opened the door slowly, so as not to make a sound. The building's hallway was empty. She tiptoed down the stairs, counting the steps just like her mom always did when they went together. 27 to the ground floor. Outside, the world seemed bigger and scarier without her mom by her side. Cars passed by. People walked hurriedly without noticing the little girl with an empty stomach. Ellie clutched the coins in her pocket. She knew they weren't enough for even a small carton of milk. She remembered the lady with the car again. Maybe she could clean car windows on the street, like the older boys sometimes did. She had never done it before, but it seemed simple. You just had to scrub until it shined. Instead of going to the grocery store, Ellie headed for the main avenue, where lots of cars usually stopped. Her heart was beating fast in her chest. She knew her mum would be frantic when she got out of the shower and didn't find her, but she had no choice. She would come back with money for food, and her mum would understand. "I can do this," she murmured to herself, clutching the coins in her pocket like a good luck charm. "My little brothers can't be hungry." People passed by without seeing the thin 5-year-old girl walking alone. Ellie walked on, determined, thinking of her brothers crying from hunger, of her mother who didn't eat to give the little they had to her children. A brave and childish decision moved her steps to help her family survive one more day. A few blocks away on the busy avenue, shiny cars waited at the traffic light. Ellie took a deep breath and moved forward, unaware that this desperate little journey would change not only her day, but the lives of many people. The main avenue was buzzing with the morning rush. Cars drove by at a steady pace. People walked hastily with their coffees in hand, eyes fixed on their phones, ignoring the world around them. The city's noise was a mix of engines, scattered conversations, and the occasional impatient honk. No one noticed the small figure carefully watching the flow of traffic, looking for an opportunity. Ellie clutched the 2 coins in her pocket as her eyes scanned the line of parked cars. She was nervous but determined. She had never done this before and wasn't sure if it would work. The people seemed so busy, so distant. No one looked at her, a girl too small to be alone on the street. Her gaze stopped on a shiny car different from the others. It was a red Porsche, so beautiful. It was parked in front of an expensive coffee shop, where well-dressed people went in and out carrying elegant cups. Through the coffee shop window, Ellie could see tables with people talking, eating things that made her empty stomach rumble. "This one looks important," she muttered to herself, approaching cautiously. The car was too tall for her to reach the windshield. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to touch the shiny surface, but it was impossible. She looked around, searching for a solution, and saw a worn wooden stool near the coffee shop entrance. It looked heavy, but it was her only option. With great effort, she dragged the stool to the front of the car. The sound of wood scraping on the sidewalk drew a few glances, but no one stopped to help or ask questions. Ellie pushed with all her might, her face red from the effort, until she positioned the stool exactly where she wanted it. She climbed up carefully, the stool wobbling a bit under her small feet. Now she could reach the front window. For a moment, she admired her own distorted reflection on the shiny surface, a thin girl with eyes too big for her pale face. She took the 2 coins she had brought and the old handkerchief she always carried from her pocket. It was a faded blue handkerchief with a small flower embroidered in the corner, a gift from a grandmother she barely remembered. She wet the handkerchief with a little saliva and began to rub the glass in circular motions, just as she had seen the older boys do. "It has to be really clean," she said to herself, focused on the task. The truth was, the glass was already spotless, but Ellie scrubbed with determination, her tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth, her face wrinkled in concentration. Her thin little arms moved in clumsy circles over the smooth surface. Every now and then, she would stop to check her work, tilting her head to see if she had left any smudges. The morning sun was starting to get warm, and Ellie felt a drop of sweat run down her forehead. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her of her insufficient breakfast and the reason she was there. She thought of the twins, of their sad little faces when there was no milk, of the heavy silence in the foodless apartment. "Just a little more," she murmured, scrubbing harder. Inside the coffee shop, Martin Hale was signing the bill for his double espresso. It was a daily ritual: strong coffee, no sugar, in a porcelain cup, always sitting at the same table by the window. It was his time for a mental review of the day, to organize priorities, to prepare for another journey of decisions. At 35, he had already built an impressive real estate empire, a meteoric rise that had surprised even the most seasoned players in the market. He was known for his sharp eye for opportunities others missed, for his calculated boldness, for his ability to work more hours than any competitor. His young face, though lined with fatigue around the eyes, revealed the price of success achieved at all costs. He wore an impeccable, custom-tailored grey suit and a discreet but very expensive watch. He didn't flaunt wealth, but every detail of his appearance was carefully chosen to convey power. Martin glanced at his watch, a mechanical, almost unconscious gesture. He had a meeting in 40 minutes with important investors, enough time to get to the office, review the final notes, and prepare the presentation for the new development. He left a generous tip, money was no object, and walked toward the exit, his mind already on the financial projections he would present. The waiter thanked him profusely, as he always did, but Martin barely heard. He was absorbed in thoughts about the new project he would launch next month, a luxury residential complex that would completely transform a previously neglected area of the city. Another victory to add to his empire. When he stepped out of the coffee shop, he stopped abruptly. Something unusual caught his attention. A tiny girl, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old, was standing on an old stool, cleaning the windshield of his Porsche. For a moment, Martin stood frozen, watching the surreal scene. The girl didn't notice him. She remained focused, scrubbing with a dirty piece of cloth what was already a perfectly clean windshield. Her thin coat had patches on the elbows and seemed several sizes too big. Her light hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her sneakers had seen better days, with the sole nearly detaching on one side. Martin looked around, searching for an adult, parents, guys, a guardian, someone to explain the presence of that child there. But the girl was completely alone. Her 5-year-old child on a busy avenue, unsupervised. It was absurd, dangerous. He approached cautiously, as if afraid of scaring her. "Hello," he said softly. Ellie jumped, startled. She nearly lost her balance on the unstable stool, but managed to steady herself by grabbing the edge of the windshield. She looked at the tall man with wide, apprehensive eyes. He wore nice clothes and had an air of importance that intimidated her. "I'm cleaning," she explained quickly, as if afraid of being scolded. "To make it pretty." Martin swallowed hard. There was something in the child's voice that caught him off guard. A mixture of innocence and determination that made him feel something strange in his chest. "This is my car," he said, trying to sound gentle. "What are you doing out here alone? Where are your parents?" Ellie clutched the dirty handkerchief in her fingers. She glanced briefly at the ground, as if considering jumping down and running, but then decided to answer. "So my mum's at home with my brothers." She hesitated, then added with determination, "I'm working." Martin blinked, all confused. "Working? But you're just a kid." "I'm 5, Ellie replied, lifting her chin with a pride that seemed incongruous in someone so small. "It's just that—" Her voice softened a bit, losing its momentary confidence. "I need money for my brothers. Milk." Something strange happened to Martin in that moment. The girl's simple, direct sentence pierced through years of indifference and emotional distance like a sharp arrow. He felt a lump in his throat and, to his own astonishment, tears began to well up in his eyes. "Milk," he repeated, his voice sounding strange even to himself. Ellie nodded seriously. "They're only one. They're twins, Tommy and Ben. They cry because there's no milk, and there's no bread either, or anything. Mommy is sad." The words came out with brutal simplicity. There was no self-pity, just a statement of facts that, why to her, was simply reality. The direct way she spoke of hunger, of sadness, as if they were normal, everyday things, hit Martin with a force he didn't expect. Martin felt the tears stream down his face without being able to control them. He hadn't cried in so long, he had almost forgotten the feeling. The last time was when he lost his mother 3 years ago, and even then the tears had been restrained, discreet, appropriate for the occasion. These were different. These came from a deep place he hadn't visited in decades, a place he had locked up and tried to forget, a place where the boy he once was still lived. "Why are you crying?" Ellie asked, tilting her head with curiosity. "Are you sad too?" The innocent question almost broke him completely. Martin wiped his face with his hand, trying to compose himself. He didn't understand what was happening to him. Why was he crying on the street in front of a strange child? It was absurd, irrational, totally out of character. "No, He started, but couldn't finish. The words just wouldn't come. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out his fine leather wallet, a gift he'd given himself when he closed his first $1 million deal at 30. Ellie watched, still standing on the stool, as he opened the wallet with slightly trembling hands. Martin took out a few bills. He didn't bother to check how much it was, and held them out to her. "Here," he said, his voice still unsteady, "for the milk." Ellie's eyes widened at the sight of the bills. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. She looked from the money to the man, suspicious for a moment, as if fearing it was some kind of trick. Then she slowly reached out her hand and took the bills. "That's a lot," she said, frowning as she counted the bills with her small fingers. "The milk doesn't cost this much." There was a disarming honesty in her words. No greed, no attempt to take advantage of the situation, just the practical observation of a child who knew the price of milk and knew this was much more. Martin swallowed hard. "Buy the milk and food, for you and your brothers, for your mom too." A huge smile lit up Ellie's face. It was as if the sun had appeared from behind heavy clouds. The transformation was instant and complete, from worry to pure joy. She jumped nimbly from the stool, clutching the money tightly in her small hand. "Thank you, mister with the nice car," she exclaimed, and her joy was pure, without artifice. It was the genuine relief of someone who had just seen a serious problem unexpectedly solved. Before Martin could say anything else, ask for her full name, her address, anything that could maintain contact. Ellie turned and started running down the sidewalk, her oversized coat flapping with each step. He watched until the small figure disappeared around the corner, feeling inexplicably empty and full at the same time. He stood there, next to his luxury car, ignoring the passers-by and the curious glances directed at the well-dressed young executive with tear tracks on his face. His heart was beating in a strange way, a rhythm he no longer recognized, familiar and strange at the same time. Finally, he got into the car and sat down, but didn't start the engine. His hands were restless, his thoughts distant in places he had long ago locked away and thrown away the key. Martin didn't go to the meeting. For the first time in his meteoric career, he cancelled a professional commitment without a detailed explanation. A brief message to his assistant. Something came up. Reschedule. And he turned off his phone completely, another unprecedented act in his disciplined routine. He drove automatically back to his mansion on the outskirts of the city, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force, his mind in a whirlwind. He barely noticed the route he was taking, the familiar streets passing like indistinct blurs as his thoughts wandered into long unvisited territories. The house was enormous, modern, with clean, minimalist lines. 3 floors, 7 bedrooms, an indoor pool, a private gym, a climate-controlled wine cellar, a movie theater, a state-of-the-art office. A showcase of success and good taste, photographed for architecture and design magazines, a trophy inhabited by a lonely man. The garden was meticulously cared for, each plant in its exact place, each flower bed perfectly aligned. Everything was precisely as Martin liked it, organized, controlled, predictable. He passed through the electronic gate, feeling a strange discomfort seeing his own home, as if seeing it through different eyes for the first time. He parked in the spacious garage next to his other 3 luxury cars. For a moment, he sat in the silence, his hands still on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then he got out of the car and entered the house, ignoring the housekeeper who greeted him, surprised to see him back so early. "Mr. Hale, is everything all right? You never come back at this hour." "I'm fine, Mrs. Peterson," he replied automatically without stopping or looking at her. "Please don't disturb me." He went straight up to his personal office on the 2nd floor and closed the door. It was his sanctuary, decorated with expensive furniture and works of art, selected by a renowned designer. Not that Martin understood much about art. He bought what he was told was a good investment, what matched the house's aesthetic. He walked to the mahogany bar in the corner and poured himself an expensive whiskey, something he rarely did before evening. He took a long sip, feeling the amber liquid burn his throat, and walked to the panoramic window that overlooked the impeccable gardens. The image of Ellie wouldn't leave his mind. Those determined eyes, the oversized coat, the childish voice saying, "I need money for my brothers and milk." Why had it affected him so much? Why had he cried in front of a strange child, on the street, like a sentimental fool? Martin Hale was not an emotional man. He was known for his calculated coldness in business, for his ability to make tough decisions without flinching. He had fired hundreds over the years, shut down entire companies, negotiated with the harshness necessary to get to the top. He wasn't cruel, he considered himself merely pragmatic. Business was business. Someone had to make the hard choices. But today, in front of a child cleaning his car, he had broken down like a teenager. It was pathetic, incomprehensible. Martin closed his eyes and, for the first time in many years, allowed himself to remember. The memory came like a wave, crashing through the barriers he had built. The tiny apartment where he grew up, on the city's east side, an area that now, ironically, was being revitalized by one of his own developments, the smell of mold that never went away, no matter how much his mother cleaned, the cold that seeped through the poorly sealed windows in winter, the suffocating heat in summer. His mother working 2 jobs, leaving before dawn, coming home after he was already in bed. The absent father, first physically, then completely, when he abandoned them. The nights they went to bed hungry, the rumbling stomach, the painful emptiness that prevented sleep. The shame at school when he didn't have money for lunch, when he wore hand-me-down clothes, when he couldn't participate in field trips or activities that cost any amount of money. One memory, in particular, emerged with painful clarity. He was 6 years old. His mother was sick, feverish, lying on the worn-out sofa that served as her bed, since the only bedroom was his. She hadn't been able to go to work that day, which meant they wouldn't get paid for that shift, and every penny counted. The refrigerator was empty, except for a bit of butter. There was no milk. There was no bread. Martin, determined to help, took a few coins he found in a kitchen drawer and snuck out while his mother slept a restless sleep. He walked to the neighborhood grocery store, clutching the coins in his small hand, just as Ellie had done today. But the coins weren't enough to buy much of anything. The store owner, a fat man with a red face, laughed when he tried to buy a quart of milk. "Go on home, kid. This ain't even enough for a piece of gum." Martin remembered the shame, the helplessness, the tears he swallowed. He remembered coming home empty-handed, the worried look on his mother's face when she woke up and discovered he had gone out alone. "Don't you ever do that again, Martin," she said, hugging him tightly despite her fever. "Never go out alone again. That's dangerous. Promise me." He promised, but the feeling of uselessness, of not being able to help when it mattered most, was etched into his soul like an invisible scar. Perhaps it was on that day that he decided, without truly understanding it yet, that he would never be helpless again. Never again would he depend on the kindness of others. Never again would he be empty-handed. He opened his eyes, returning to the present. His reflection in the window showed a young, successful, powerful, respected man. Martin Hale, the real estate prodigy who rose from poverty and built an empire before 35. He had buried that poor, hungry boy so deep that he had almost forgotten his existence, until today, until Ellie. Her face appeared in his mind like a gentle accusation. That little child had awakened something Martin believed had been dead for a long time: empathy, compassion, the memory of pain, feelings he had deliberately left behind on his climb to success, feelings he considered weaknesses, obstacles to be overcome. Now they were returning, bringing a bittersweet pain and a strange relief, like a numb limb regaining feeling. First, the uncomfortable tingling, then the normal sensation, a reminder that it's still there, still part of the body. Martin looked at his mansion, at the perfect gardens, at the expensive cars, at the valuable works of art, everything he had ever wanted, everything he had worked tirelessly for. And yet, seeing that little girl today, he felt an emptiness so profound it almost swallowed him. He had spent so much time building walls around himself that he had forgotten what he was protecting. Or maybe the walls weren't protecting anything. Maybe they just kept the emptiness isolated so he wouldn't have to face it. Martin sat down heavily in his Italian leather chair, the whiskey forgotten in his hand. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deals, acquisitions, or profits. He was thinking about a 5-year-old girl who had left home to get milk for her brothers. He was thinking about hunger, desperation, courage, and he was thinking about who he had been, who he had become, and the void that had grown inside him without him even noticing. The phone rang, probably his assistant wanting to know why he had missed the meeting, or trying to pass on urgent messages from investors. Martin didn't answer. Instead, he stared out the window, seeing without really seeing the perfect gardens of his empty mansion, while Ellie's face danced in his mind, haunting him in a sweet and painful way. Martin couldn't sleep that night. He tossed and turned in his king-size bed, Ellie's face appearing every time he closed his eyes. At 4 in the morning, He gave up trying. He got up, took a long shower, and dressed in more casual clothes than usual, jeans and a simple shirt. He had no meetings today. He had cancelled everything. At 7 o'clock sharp, he parked his car in the exact same spot as the day before, in front of the coffee shop. He ordered the same coffee, sat at the same table by the window. His eyes didn't leave the sidewalk for a second, searching for a little girl in an oversized coat. 8 o'clock, 9, 10, no sign of Ellie. "More coffee, sir?" the waiter asked for the third time. Martin nodded distractedly. There was something strange about the way he felt. It wasn't just concern for a lost child in the city. It was something more personal, deeper. As if an invisible thread had stretched between him and that girl, and now it was pulling insistently. Noon. The coffee shop was getting busier. Martin remained motionless, watching. The waiter was starting to give him curious looks. At 2 in the afternoon, he finally gave up. He paid the exorbitant bill for the numerous coffees and left, feeling strangely defeated. He got in his car but didn't drive home. Instead, he circled slowly through the nearby streets, scanning every corner, every alley, every park. Nothing. She must have gone home with the money, he thought. She must be fine, buying milk for her brothers. But the feeling of emptiness persisted. The next morning, he repeated the ritual. Same place, same time, same anxious wait. And again, no Ellie. On the third day, the waiter finally asked, "Are you waiting for someone, sir?" Martin hesitated. "Yes, a little girl who was cleaning my car the other day." The waiter frowned. "Oh, the little one. She shows up around here sometimes, cleans cars on the corner, asks for change." Martin's heart raced. "You know her. Do you know where she lives?" "No, sir. I just see her around every now and then. People usually give her a few coins. Seems like a good kid." Martin nodded, an idea forming in his mind. The next day, he didn't go to the coffee shop. Instead, he walked around the neighborhood, approaching street vendors, doormen, and people who looked like they worked or lived in the area. He would show a large bill and ask about a small girl, about 5 years old, who cleaned cars. Most shook their heads no. Some vaguely remembered a child but knew nothing specific. It wasn't until late in the afternoon that he got lucky. A man selling hot dogs on the corner nodded when he heard the description. "I know who you mean. She shows up here now and then. Gave her a hot dog once. She had a look on her face that could break your heart." "Do you know where she lives?" Martin asked, trying not to sound desperate. The man scratched his head. "Don't know the exact address, but it's up on the hill. In that housing project past the market. Hope's Landing, I think it's called." Martin felt a pang of irony at the name. Hope. Something he had long since abandoned, until he met that girl. "Thank you," he said, handing the man a generous bill. "Aye, for the hot dog you gave her." The man looked at the money in surprise. "Hey, this is too much just for a piece of information." But Martin was already walking toward his car. Hope's Landing wasn't what you'd call a nice neighborhood. Worn-out apartment buildings were crammed together on a steep hill, with makeshift electrical wires crisscrossing over narrow streets. Barefoot children ran between clothes hanging on makeshift clotheslines. Loud music came from somewhere, competing with the noise of televisions from open windows. Martin parked the Porsche at the beginning of the main street and immediately realized he'd made a mistake. The car drew too much attention. Groups of young men turned to look, whispering among themselves. Their car like that probably cost more than all the apartments on that street combined. For a moment, he considered giving up, coming back another day with a different, less conspicuous car. But then he thought of Ellie, of her determined little face, the way she had run with the money clutched in her hand. He couldn't wait any longer. He got out of the car, locked it, and activated the alarm. He started walking up the main street, feeling the eyes following him. He was completely out of his element, with his expensive clothes and luxury watch. But he pressed on, asking everyone he met, "Do you know a girl named Ellie?" "She's 5, lives with her mom and 1-year-old twin brothers." Most just shook their heads. Some looked at him with suspicion. One man even asked, hostilely, "Why's a guy like you looking for a kid from around here?" Martin realized how suspicious he sounded. A rich man, an outsider, looking for a little girl in a poor neighborhood. He needed to explain himself better. "She cleaned my car the other day. I gave her money to buy milk for her brothers. I just want to know if she's okay." Some expressions softened with this explanation, but there was still distrust. An elderly woman, sitting in a chair at the entrance of one of the buildings, finally nodded. "Rachel's girl. Apartment 302 in that yellow building over there." She pointed to a particularly run-down building halfway up the street. "The mother worked in housekeeping until she lost her job. Good woman, takes good care of her kids, despite the hardship." "Thank you," Martin said, feeling his heart speed up. He was about to head toward the indicated building when he spotted a small figure sitting on the sidewalk a few feet away. His heart leaped. There she was. Ellie was sitting on the cracked concrete of the sidewalk, absorbed in her game. She had several colorful bottle caps spread out in front of her, arranging them in rows. She was talking to herself in a low voice, lost in her own world. Martin approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. She was so focused that she didn't notice his presence until his shadow fell over her bottle caps. Ellie looked up, initially confused. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "Mister with the nice car," she exclaimed, a smile lighting up her whole face. Her reaction took him by surprise. Martin had expected fear, suspicion, maybe even for her to run away. Instead, there was this genuine joy, as if he were a dear friend she hadn't seen in a long time. "Hi, Ellie," he said, his voice strangely hoarse. "How do you know my name?" she asked, tilting her head to the side. "Tass, I asked around," Martin replied, crouching down to her level. "I wanted to know if you were okay, if you bought the milk for your brothers." Her face lit up even more. "I did. And bread, and bananas, and even meat. Mommy was super happy." She paused, frowning slightly. "And a little mad, too, because I went out by myself." Her smile returned quickly. "But then she was just happy. We saved the rest of the money for when we need it." Martin smiled, feeling a relief he didn't know he needed. "That's good. Look at my bottle caps," Ellie said, showing him her colorful collection. "This blue one is Mommy. These two red ones are Tommy and Ben, and this green one is me." Martin looked at the colorful bottle caps, meticulously arranged on the sidewalk. He sat down next to her, completely ignoring the fact that his expensive pants were now in direct contact with the dirty concrete. "And this gold one? Who is it?" he asked, pointing to one that was slightly separate from the others. Ellie looked at him, then at the bottle cap, as if the answer were obvious. "It's you, silly." Martin felt a lump in his throat. He had a bottle cap in her story. He was part of that little imaginary world. "Why do you have such a nice car?" Ellie asked, changing the subject with the naturalness only children possess. "Because," Martin began, then stopped. The automatic response would be, "Because I work hard and can afford it," but suddenly that sounded empty. "Because I thought I needed it," he said finally. "My mum says we only need what makes our tummies full and our hearts happy," Ellie commented, playing distractedly with the green bottle cap that represented her. "Does the car make your heart happy?" The innocent question hit him like a punch. Did it make his heart happy? When was the last time he had thought about that? About happiness instead of success, status, or achievements? "Sometimes," he answered honestly. Ellie nodded seriously, as if she had just received a great philosophical truth. She went back to playing with her bottle caps, moving them around on the sidewalk floor. Martin watched in silence for a moment, then something prompted him to speak. "You know, Ellie, when I was about your age, we didn't have much money at home either." She stopped playing and looked at him, surprised. "Really? But you have a nice car." "I do now," he said with a small smile. "But when I was a kid, sometimes we didn't have milk at home either. Or bread." Her eyes widened. "Just like us?" "Just like you," Martin confirmed. "My mom raised me by herself. We also went through hard times." "And did you play with bottle caps too?" Martin smiled, remembering. "No, I collected toy cars, but they were very old. Some didn't even have wheels. I would pretend they were new." "I pretend too," Ellie said, moving a little closer. "I pretend the bottle caps are real people, that we live in a big house, that Tommy and Ben have milk every day." Martin felt a tightness in his chest. "And now, after you bought things with the money, is there still no milk?" Ellie shook her head. "No, there is now. But Mommy said she needs to find a job soon, or the money will run out. Martin nodded thoughtfully. He wanted to help more, but he realized he needed to be careful. He didn't want to offend Ellie's mother's pride or create a relationship of dependency. "Is your mum home now?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," Ellie answered, pointing to the yellow building. "She's giving the twins a bath. She told me to play out here because they were crying a lot. They always cry at bath time." Martin looked at the yellow building, feeling a strange nervousness. Why was he so anxious? It was just a woman trying to raise 3 children on her own, someone who could easily be helped with his resources. "Ellie," he said hesitantly, "do you think your mum would be very mad if I met you guys, saw your home?" Ellie frowned, thinking, "I don't know. She doesn't really like strangers." "Of course," Martin said quickly. "I understand completely." "But you're not a stranger," Ellie continued. "You're the nice car mister who gave us money for milk. And you have a bottle cap." Martin smiled. The child's logic was both simple and profound. "I can help," he said, the words coming out before he could think them through. "Your mum is looking for work, right? Maybe I can help with that." "Really?" Ellie's eyes lit up. "Mommy would be less sad. She cries at night when she thinks we're asleep." Martin felt his heart ache. He remembered his own mother years ago doing the same thing. "Can I talk to her?" he asked, standing up. "I promise I'll be respectful." Ellie seemed to consider for a moment, looking at him and then at the building. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said, gathering her bottle caps and carefully putting them in the pocket of her oversized coat. "But don't tell her I said she cries, okay? She gets embarrassed." "I won't," Martin promised. As they walked together toward the yellow building, Martin felt a mix of nervousness and determination. He didn't know exactly what he would say to Ellie's mother, how he would explain his presence there, how he would offer help without seeming condescending or intrusive. But he knew he had to try. Because in that little girl with colorful bottle caps, he had found something he thought he had lost forever, a connection to his own past, to the humanity he had buried under years of ambition and empty success. And for the first time in a long time, Martin wasn't thinking about business, about profits, about conquering more. He was just thinking about how he could help this family, how he could be part of something real and meaningful again. "Come on," said Ellie, taking his hand matter-of-factly and pulling him toward the building's entrance. "Mommy will like you. You're nice." Martin followed, feeling the small grip of that confident hand in his, knowing he was about to cross a threshold that would change his life forever. Martin climbed the stairs of the yellow building, following Ellie, who skipped a few steps ahead. The dimly lit hallway smelled of dampness and cooking. Peeling walls showed water stains, and the handrail was loose in some spots. Still, he noticed that someone tried to keep the place clean. The floor, though worn, was free of trash. "This is it," Ellie announced, stopping in front of a door with the number 302 hand-painted on it. She knocked 3 times as excitedly. "Mommy!" "I brought a friend." Martin suddenly felt nervous. What was he doing here? How would he explain his presence? He automatically straightened his shirt and ran a hand through his hair. The door opened. A young woman appeared, holding a baby. She must have been around 25, but the exhaustion on her face made her look older. Even so, there was a natural beauty to her features, a kind of dignity that hardship hadn't managed to erase. She wore a simple t-shirt and faded jeans. Her hair, the same color as Ellie's, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes widened when she saw Martin, a well-dressed stranger standing next to her daughter. "Who are you?" she asked directly, pulling Ellie closer with her free hand. "Mommy, it's the mister with the nice car," Ellie explained before Martin could answer. "The one who gave me money for the milk, remember?" Rachel's face changed from suspicion to recognition. Her eyes scanned Martin from head to toe. "I'm Martin Hale," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I met Ellie a few days ago when she was cleaning my car." Rachel didn't take his hand. She held the baby firmly, and her gaze was a mixture of shame and wounded pride. "I know who you are," she said, surprising Martin. "I saw your picture in a local paper. The real estate developer." Martin lowered his hand, embarrassed. "Yes, that's me. What are you doing here?" The question was direct, without preamble. Martin hesitated. I wanted to see if Ellie was okay, if the money had helped. From inside the apartment came the cry of another baby. Rachel sighed. Ellie, go check on your brother, she asked. The girl ran inside, leaving the adults at the door. Rachel looked at Martin for a moment, seeming to decide something. Thank you for the money. It helped a lot. She started to close the door, but Martin spoke quickly. Wait, please, I just wanted to talk. About what exactly? Her voice was firm but not hostile. About how I can help. Rachel lifted her chin. Say we don't need charity, Mr. Hale. Martin noticed the pride in her eyes. It was the same pride his own mother had shown so many times, even in the worst moments. It's not charity, he said, lowering his voice. I've been on the other side. I've been through what you're going through. Rachel studied him for a moment, the baby fidgeting in her arms. From inside, Ellie called out, Mommy, Tommy wants water. Rachel hesitated, then opened the door wider. Come in. But just for a moment. The apartment was small, but surprisingly clean and organized, considering it housed 3 children. There was only the bare essentials, a worn-out sofa, a table with 3 chairs, a small old television. The kitchen was just a corner with a stove, a small fridge and a sink. Martin saw a door that must lead to a bedroom and another, ajar, that showed a tiny bathroom. Ellie was on the living room floor, next to a mattress where another baby identical to the one Rachel was holding sat whimpering. Improvised toys, bottle caps, empty containers, boxes, were scattered on the floor. Water, Mommy, Ellie reminded her. Rachel put the baby she was carrying down next to his brother and went to the kitchen. Martin stood still, observing. On the wall, there were some children's drawings taped up. In a corner, a stack of printed resumes. On the table, children's books worn from use. You can sit, Rachel said, returning with a cup of water, which she handed to Ellie to give to her brother. She pointed to one of the chairs. If you want. Martin sat, feeling too large for the small space. Thank you. So, Rachel began, sitting across from him with her arms crossed. What brings you here, Mr. Hale? Martin, please, he corrected her. When Ellie approached me to clean my car, she told me she needed money for milk, for her brothers. She never should have gone out alone, Rachel said, looking at her daughter with a mix of affection and concern. I almost died of fright when I couldn't find her at home. She's very brave, Martin commented. Too brave sometimes, Rachel sighed. Then she looked directly at Martin. I appreciate the money. It helped us a lot. But like I said, we don't need charity. I'm looking for a job. I will be able to support my children. There was so much determination in her voice that Martin didn't doubt it for a second. I don't doubt that, he said sincerely. It's just that when I saw Ellie, I remembered myself. When I was a kid, Rachel raised an eyebrow, surprised. You, Martin nodded. I grew up in a place not very different from this one. My mother raised me alone. I also went through hardships. Rachel studied his face, as if searching for signs of a lie. She seemed genuinely surprised. You don't look it, she said finally. Martin gave a small smile. So I worked very hard to change that. One of the babies started to cry louder. Rachel immediately stood up and picked him up, calming him with soft murmurs. This is Tommy, she explained. The more impatient of the two, Ben is calmer. Martin watched how she handled the babies, with firmness and affection, despite the evident exhaustion on her face. He saw the deep dark circles under her eyes, the small cuts and calluses on her hands. Hands that worked hard. You said you lost your job, he asked, trying to sound casual. Rachel sighed. I worked in housekeeping at a hotel. It closed down 2 months ago. Since then, I've been doing odd jobs, but it's hard with 3 kids. And their father? He left before the twins were born, she replied, in a tone that made it clear she didn't want to elaborate. It's just the 4 of us now. Martin nodded, not pushing. He looked around again, noticing more details. The window with a makeshift curtain. The neatly stacked dishes. The few food items organized in clear containers. A home of few resources, but full of care. I should go, he said, standing up. But Can I come back another day? Rachel seemed surprised by the request. Why? Because... Martin hesitated. How could he explain this impulse that even he didn't fully understand? Because meeting Ellie, and now you, it made me remember important things I had forgotten. Rachel didn't answer right away. Finally, she shrugged. It's a free country. It wasn't exactly a warm invitation, but it was enough. In the following days, Martin couldn't get that family out of his head. Little Ellie with her bottle caps, the twins with their toothless smiles, Rachel with her firm dignity in the face of hardship. He went back to work, but his heart wasn't in it. During important meetings, he found himself thinking about the small apartment, the peeling walls and the nearly empty fridge. On the third day, he made a decision. He left the office early and went to a supermarket, not the one he usually frequented, but a simpler one, where ordinary people shopped. He filled 2 carts with basic groceries: milk, bread, fruit, meat, vegetables, cereals, cookies. He added diapers and hygiene products. In the toy aisle, he hesitated, then picked up a small teddy bear for each twin and a simple doll for Ellie. When he arrived at Hope's Landing, the sun was beginning to set. This time, he parked the car further away and carried the heavy bags up the main street. Some residents looked at him with curiosity, but there wasn't as much hostility as the first time. He slowly climbed the stairs, the bags bumping against his legs. He arrived breathless at the 3rd floor and knocked on door 302, trying to catch his breath. It was Ellie who opened the door, her eyes widening when she saw Martin with so many bags. "The car, mister!" she exclaimed, jumping with joy. "Mommy!" "It's Martin." Rachel appeared right behind her, drying her hands on a dish towel. When she saw the bags, her face hardened. "What is this?" she asked, her defensive tone back. "Just a few things," Martin replied awkwardly. "I thought they might be useful." Ellie was already peeking into the bags, her eyes shining. "Chocolate." "Mommy, there's chocolate." Rachel hesitated, clearly conflicted. Martin waited, without pushing. "Please," he said softly, "accept it. It's not charity. It's solidarity." Something in his tone must have touched Rachel. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She stepped away from the door. "Come in," she said simply. Martin entered and placed the bags on the small table. Ellie was already showing her brothers the contents, talking excitedly. The twins, sitting on the living room mattress, clapped their hands without understanding the reason for the commotion. "There's meat and milk and bananas and cookies." Ellie jumped into her mother's arms upon seeing the bags. "Oh, look how much, Mommy." Rachel hugged her daughter, her eyes welling up. For a moment, her facade of strength broke, and Martin saw the vulnerability behind it, the fear, the exhaustion, the momentary relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. This will help a lot." Martin smiled, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. "You're welcome." While Rachel put away the groceries, Martin sat on the floor with the children. He gave the teddy bears to the twins, who grabbed them with little squeals of joy. Ellie hugged her new doll tightly, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Would you like to have dinner with us?" Rachel invited, surprising both herself and Martin. "It's nothing fancy, but I'd love to," he replied sincerely. As he watched Rachel prepare a simple meal, playing with the children on the living room floor, Martin felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of belonging, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. Later, when the twins were asleep and Ellie was playing quietly with her new doll, Martin approached Rachel in the small kitchen. "If you want," he said quietly, "I can help. With a job, maybe. I know people. I have contacts." Rachel looked at him, suspicious. "Why?" Martin took a deep breath. "Because I know what it's like. I've been in need when I was little." And because he hesitated, then completed with sincerity. "And because your family reminded me of what really matters." For a long moment, Rachel just watched him. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. It was a small thing, just a tiny gesture. But for Martin, it signified the beginning of a true connection, a bridge built with respect and empathy, linking two worlds that, though distant on the surface, shared a common humanity. The weeks passed, and Martin's visits to Rachel's family became frequent. Sometimes he would show up with grocery bags, other times just to play with the children. The twins now smiled when they saw him, and Ellie would run to the door when she heard his characteristic knock. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 more. That Saturday afternoon, Martin suggested a trip to the nearby park. The day was overcast, but not rainy, and the kids needed some fresh air. Rachel hesitated at first, worried about the weather, but Ellie's enthusiasm was contagious. "Please, Mommy, I want to show Martin the swings." Rachel smiled, defeated. "All right, but we'll bring jackets, and we'll come right back if it starts to rain." They got ready quickly. Martin helped dress the twins while Rachel prepared a small bag with diapers and snacks. The park was only 4 blocks away, a short walk that Ellie turned into an adventure, jumping on every crack in the sidewalk. "Careful, Ellie," Rachel warned, pushing the double stroller with the twins. "Let her be," Martin said with a smile. "Kids need to jump." Rachel shook her head but smiled. It was hard to deny that Martin had a special way with children. Lately, she had noticed how different he seemed during his visits, more relaxed, more alive, as if their presence awakened something dormant within him. The park was almost empty due to the cloudy weather. Ellie ran ahead, straight for the swings. "Push me, Martin, really high." Martin caught up to her, laughing at her excitement. Rachel watched, the twins restless in the stroller, eager to get out too. "Just a minute, little ones," she said, adjusting their clothes. For half an hour, they enjoyed the park. Martin took turns pushing Ellie on the swing and playing with the twins on the small slide. Rachel sat on a bench watching. It was strange, she thought, how this rich, powerful man seemed so at ease playing in the sand with her children. Nothing remained of the serious businessman she saw in the local papers. That's when the first drops of rain began to fall. "Time to go," Rachel announced, standing up. "It's starting to rain." Martin nodded, helping the twins get back into the stroller. Ellie, however, wanted one last ride down the slide. "Just one more time, Mommy, please." Quickly then, Rachel relented. Ellie ran up the steps and slid down, screaming with joy. As she jumped off the end of the slide, she didn't notice the small puddle that had formed from the rain. Her foot slipped, and she fell to her knees on the rough cement ground. The scream that followed made Rachel drop the stroller and run. Martin got there first, crouching beside Ellie, who was crying loudly, holding her knee. "Let me see, Princess," he asked gently. Ellie moved her hand away, revealing a cut that wasn't very deep but was bleeding quite a bit. The ripped and blood-stained jeans seemed to make it look worse. "My knee," she sobbed, her face contorted in pain. Martin felt something tighten in his chest. It was a simple scrape, the kind all kids get at some point, but her crying affected him in a way he hadn't expected. Suddenly, it was as if time had rewound, and he was the little boy crying, with no one to help him except a mother too exhausted to offer more than quick words of comfort. "It's going to be okay," he said, his voice strangely choked up. Without a second thought, he picked Ellie up in his arms. Rachel arrived, breathless. "What happened?" "Is she—" "She slipped and cut her knee," Martin explained. "It's nothing serious, but we need to clean it." The rain started to fall harder. Martin took off his coat with one arm, still holding Ellie, and covered her head. "I saw a pharmacy on the corner," he said. "Let's go there. It's closer than going home." Rachel hesitated, looking at the twins in the stroller. Martin noticed her concern. "You take the twins, I'll take Ellie. We'll go together." They ran through the increasing rain, Martin carrying Ellie with ease, Rachel pushing the stroller, trying to keep the babies dry with the cover. When they reached the pharmacy, they were all soaked, except for Ellie, protected by Martin's coat. The pharmacist, an elderly man, showed them to a small room in the back. "You can use this," he offered, bringing a first aid kit. Martin sat Ellie on the counter, speaking softly while Rachel calmed the twins, who were starting to cry, agitated by all the commotion. "This is going to sting a little," Martin warned, preparing to clean the wound. "But you're brave, aren't you?" Ellie nodded, still sobbing. She grabbed his hand tightly as he gently cleaned the scrape with antiseptic, her face contorted with the sting, but she didn't scream again. "You're being very brave," he praised, smiling to hide his own emotion. Rachel watched, impressed by Martin's gentleness. There was a tenderness in his gestures she had never noticed before, not just kindness, but a deep empathy, as if Ellie's pain were his own. When he finished cleaning and putting on a colourful bandage, Martin lifted Ellie into his arms again. "All done. Now you have a medal of courage on your knee." Ellie smiled through her tears. "It still hurts. It'll go away," he assured her. "And in the meantime, how about some ice cream to help?" Rachel intervened. "Martin, she could catch a cold. She's already all wet and—" "Just a tiny one," he insisted, with a pleading look that made Rachel laugh. "You two make the same face when you ask for something," she commented. They waited for the rain to let up at the pharmacy. Martin bought medicine, more bandages, and even some dry clothes for the kids at the store next door. When they finally left, he was still carrying Ellie, who rested her head on his shoulder, already recovered from the scare. On the way back, they stopped for the promised ice cream. Martin sat with Ellie at a table, while Rachel fed the twins baby food. Watching them, she realized that something had changed. Martin was no longer the wealthy benefactor who showed up with gifts and solutions. He was someone who truly cared, who stood by them in the tough times, not just the good ones. When they got to the apartment, Ellie was already asleep in Martin's arms, exhausted from the adventure. He carefully placed her in bed, tucking in the blanket. "Thank you," Rachel said softly when they were alone in the small living room. "For today, for everything." Martin smiled, a sincere smile that reached his eyes. "You don't have to thank me. That's what friends are for, right?" Friends. The word hung between them, simple and true. Rachel nodded, returning the smile. It was no longer the millionaire and the unemployed single mother. They were just two people who, somehow, improbably, had found trust in one another. The light rain tapped against the window of the small apartment, creating a gentle melody that cradled the Sunday afternoon. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at the park. Ellie's knee was almost healed, just a small pink mark remaining as a reminder of the scare. In the living room, Ellie played on the rug with her brothers, showing the twins how to stack the colourful blocks Martin had brought on his last visit. The babies laughed, knocking over the stacks with enthusiastic pats, much to their older sister's frustration and amusement. "No, Tommy, not like that. You have to put one on top of the other." Rachel smiled, watching her children from the worn-out sofa where she sat next to Martin. She held a cup of tea in her hands, blowing on it slowly before taking a sip. "They learn fast," Martin commented. "Soon they'll be building towers taller than hers, and knocking them down too," Rachel added with a playful sigh. A comfortable silence settled between them. After so many visits, the initial tension was gone. Martin had become a constant presence in the family's life, bringing not only material help, but a friendship Rachel hadn't expected. "Can I ask you something?" Martin broke the silence and hesitantly. "Of course," she replied, placing her cup on the coffee table. "You never talk about their father." Rachel looked away toward the children. For a moment, Martin thought he had crossed a line, but then she took a deep breath. "There's not much to tell," she began, her voice low so Ellie wouldn't hear. "I met Greg when I was 19. I was working as a supermarket cashier. I had just moved out of my parents' house." She paused, as if gathering her memories. "He was charming, fun. He made me laugh. He said he had big plans, that he was going to start his own business. I believed everything." A sad smile crossed her lips. "We moved in together after 6 months. When I found out I was pregnant with Ellie, we were happy. At least I was." Martin listened in silence, not interrupting. Rachel continued, her gaze distant. "After Ellie was born, things changed. Greg started going out more, coming home late. He'd say he was looking for opportunities. He'd get odd jobs here and there, but never anything steady. We argued more and more." She looked at the twin, who were now trying to crawl over the scattered blocks. "When I found out I was pregnant again, and with twins, Greg became different, distant. One night, he came home late, packed a bag, and said he needed space, that he wasn't ready for so much responsibility." Rachel shrugged, but he never came back. "I'm sorry," Martin said, his voice low. "It was hard to accept at first," she continued. "I had a young daughter. I was pregnant with twins. with no family nearby. My parents live in another state, and we barely have contact. I had to find strength I didn't even know I had. Just then, Ben crawled over to them and tugged on Rachel's pants, babbling. She picked him up, settling him on her lap. I got the job at the hotel when the twins were 6 months old. The owner let me bring the kids. She had a little room in the back where they could stay. It was perfect until the hotel closed. She kissed the baby's head. Since then, it's been complicated. Martin admired the strength of this woman. No drama, no self-pity, just the raw truth of a daily struggle. How do you do it? He asked, genuinely impressed. 3 kids done alone with no support. Rachel shrugged. One day at a time. I don't have a choice, do I? They're my children. Did you ever think about looking for their father? What for? There was a firmness in her voice. Someone who leaves willingly doesn't deserve to come back out of obligation. I'd rather the kids grow up with less money, but with respect and real love. Martin nodded, understanding. He looked at Ellie, who was now reading a book to Tommy, making up stories from the pictures. Rachel, he said after a moment, I have a proposal. She looked at him cautiously. What kind of proposal? I have an opening at my company, in the administrative department. Nothing too complex, but it's a decent job, with regular hours and benefits. Rachel's eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? Yes, Martin confirmed. We need someone who is organized, responsible, and punctual. From what I've seen these past few weeks, you're all that and more. She frowned. Martin, I appreciate it, but I don't want charity. I don't need you to create a position just for... It's not charity, he interrupted. The position exists. My assistant has been overworked for months. We need someone to organize files, answer phones, manage schedules. It's a real job. But I have no experience with that. I've always worked in more manual labor jobs. You manage this household with 3 young children, with no help and limited resources, Martin argued. That requires more organizational skills than many executives I know. Rachel shook her head, not in disagreement, but in disbelief. And the kids, I can't leave them alone. The office has an on-site daycare for employees, he explained. Give the employees children. The twins can stay there during your shift. And Ellie is school-age now, isn't she? Yes, but... Rachel bit her lip. It sounds too good to be true. It's not a favor, Martin assured her. It's an opportunity. For you and for my company. Ben squirmed in Rachel's lap, wanting to get back on the floor. She placed him on the rug, and he crawled back to his toys. What would the salary be, she finally asked, looking Martin in the eyes. He mentioned a figure that made her eyes widen again. It was more than double what she earned at the hotel. That's a lot, she said, breathless. It's what the position pays, he replied simply. And there's room for growth if you're interested. Rachel looked at her children, then at the small apartment with peeling walls, and finally back at Martin. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Martin followed her gaze to the children. Because everyone deserves a chance. I got mine. Now it's your turn. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Martin could see the thoughts racing across her face. Doubt, hope, fear, determination. When can I start? She asked finally. Martin smiled. Would Monday be good for you? Rachel nodded, a smile slowly spreading across her face. Monday, she agreed. That night, after Martin had left and the children were asleep, Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't just seem like a series of obstacles to overcome. There was an open door, a real possibility. She looked at the twins sleeping in their crib and at Ellie curled up under the blanket. Her children would have food on the table every day, proper clothes, maybe hut eventually, a better place to live, a decent income, simple words that meant a world of difference. Rachel lay down, closing her eyes. The rain was still tapping against the window, but now the sound seemed different. It was no longer a melancholy tune, but the gentle rhythm of new possibilities. Rachel checked her reflection in the small hallway mirror. Neat hair, light makeup, formal but comfortable clothes. Her work uniform, as she joked to herself, 2 weeks into the new job, and it still felt surreal. "Ellie, shoes, we're going to be late," she called, adjusting the bag on her shoulder as she finished packing the twins' diaper bag. Life had changed quickly. They woke up earlier, followed a strict routine. Ellie went to school and then an after-school program, while the twins stayed at the company daycare. Rachel worked in the administrative department, quickly learning her new duties. At the end of the day, Martin often gave them a ride home in his car, sometimes stopping for a simple dinner on the way. It was tiring, but for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt secure. Her first paycheck had already allowed her to buy new clothes for the children, pay off overdue bills, and even save a little. "Ready, Mommy," Ellie appeared, proud in her full school uniform. "Perfect. Let's go, the boys are already in the stroller." She opened the door and almost collided with a man standing in the hallway, about to knock. For a second, she didn't recognize him. Then, her heart stopped. "Greg?" The man in front of her looked both familiar and strange. Thinner than she remembered, shorter hair, simple but neat clothes. His eyes, however, were the same, light brown like Ellie's. "Hi, Rachel," he said with a hesitant smile. "Long time no see." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. 2 years. 2 years without a word, a call, any financial help. 2 years raising 3 children alone. And now here he was, standing at her door as if he had just stepped out to buy cigarettes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice firmer than she expected. Greg looked over her shoulder, into the apartment. "I wanted to see the kids, see how you all are doing." "Daddy!" Ellie's small voice made Rachel turn. The girl was standing in the middle of the room, looking at the man at the door with an expression that was hard to decipher. Greg smiled, crouching down. "Hey, princess, look how you've grown." Ellie didn't run to him, as Rachel had feared she might. Instead, she stood still, examining him with a seriousness that was impressive for a 5-year-old. "You're my dad," she said finally, with a clarity that surprised everyone. "You left us. You made Mommy sad. We're fine without you." Greg looked as if he'd been physically struck by the words. He stood up slowly, the smile vanishing. He lowered his head, speechless. Rachel felt a mix of pride and concern. How could her little daughter articulate so clearly what she herself struggled to express? "We're late," Rachel said, pushing the stroller with the twins into the hallway. The babies looked curiously at the stranger, without recognition. "Are those them?" Greg asked, looking at the twins with an unreadable expression. Are they our kids?" "They're my kids," Rachel corrected. "We have to go. I have work, and the children have places to be." "Work?" Greg seemed surprised. "Where?" "That's none of your business," she replied, closing the apartment door. "Now, if you'll excuse us—" "Rachel, please," he pleaded. "I just want to talk. I've changed. I got a steady job. I've been clean for 8 months. I want to be a part of their lives." She stared at him, searching his face for signs of a lie. Greg had always been good with words, with promises. "We're late," she repeated. "If you really want to talk, come back tonight, at 7. Greg nodded quickly. "I'll be here. Thank you, Rachel." She didn't reply, walking past him with the stroller. Ellie followed, casting one last suspicious glance at her father before taking her mother's hand. In the elevator, Rachel took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in her hands. "Are you mad, Mommy?" Ellie asked. Rachel looked at her daughter. "Not at you, sweetie. Never at you. Is he going to leave again?" The question hung in the air, too heavy for a workday morning. "I don't know," Rachel answered honestly. "But we'll be okay no matter what happens. Remember what I always say. We're a team," Ellie replied with a small smile. "Exactly. The best team in the world." In the days that followed, Greg became a frequent, though still peripheral, presence in their lives. He would show up in the late afternoon, bringing small gifts, a pack of candy, a plastic toy car, a cheap doll. He would sit in the living room for an hour or less, trying to talk to the children. Ellie remained distant, answering only when necessary, watching him with suspicious eyes. The twins, however, were another story. Too young to remember the abandonment, they looked with curiosity at this man who brought toys and made funny voices. Rachel watched everything cautiously, She didn't stop the visits but set clear rules, never without her present, never for more than an hour, never interfering with the children's routine. During one of these visits, while Greg was trying to get Ben to hold a small bear, Martin appeared at the door. The encounter was tense, two men representing completely different worlds in Rachel's life. "This is Martin," she introduced, "my boss and a family friend." The two men sized each other up, Greg, visibly uncomfortable, Martin, polite but cold. "I'll come back another time," Martin said, sensing the tension. "I just stopped by to drop off the paperwork for that form you asked for." After he left, Greg asked, a hint of jealousy in his voice, "Does he come here often?" "Often," Rachel replied, without elaborating. "Martin has been a great support for us." Greg nodded, a muscle twitching in his jaw. One afternoon, almost a week after his return, Rachel finally decided it was time for a frank conversation. The children were asleep, the twins in their crib, Ellie on her small bed in the corner of the room. "Why did you come back now, Greg?" she asked directly, sitting at the kitchen table. He swirled the coffee cup between his hands, thoughtful. "Because I finally felt ready," he answered. "I was a coward, Rachel. When I found out about the twins, I panicked. I couldn't imagine how I'd support 3 kids when I could barely take care of myself." "And I could," she retorted. "You think I wasn't scared too?" Greg looked down. "I know there are no excuses. I just want a chance to know my kids. To be a father, even if it's late." Rachel studied his face, trying to separate sincerity from manipulation. Greg had always known how to look sorry when it suited him. "They don't need cheap gifts or occasional visits," she said finally. "They need consistency, someone they can trust, who won't disappear when things get tough." "I know," he agreed. "And I'm trying to be that person now. I have a steady job. I'm attending a support group. I've rented a small apartment a few blocks from here." Rachel looked him directly in the eye, without flinching. "I hope you don't disappear from their lives again," she said, each word heavy with meaning. "Because if that happens, there won't be a third chance. Do you understand?" Greg held her gaze and nodded slowly. "I understand." Rachel didn't say she believed him. She didn't say she trusted his promises. Years of disappointment had taught her to value actions over words. But for now, she would let him try. Not for the feelings she once had for him, long since buried, not for some romantic dream of a reunited family, but because, despite everything, he was the father of her children, and they deserved the chance to know him, to decide for themselves what role he would play in their lives. Meanwhile, Rachel would continue to do what she had always done: protect her children, build a better future, and move forward, with or without Greg in the picture. Martin twirled a pen between his fingers, staring at the stack of documents on his desk. Outside his office, the bustle of the company in full swing followed its normal rhythm: phones ringing, professional conversations, the familiar sound of a successful organization. But something had changed within him. In the past few months, since Ellie had walked into his life cleaning his car window, Martin saw the world through different eyes. The empire he had built, the buildings he had erected, the billion-dollar deals, it all seemed different now. Not less important, just incomplete. He picked up the first document from the pile, the clean slate foundation. The letterhead read in elegant script. Below it, the mission statement: to support families in vulnerable situations with a special focus on single mothers and their children. The idea had come to him weeks earlier after a visit to Rachel's family. The twins had taken their first steps that day, wobbling around the small apartment with squeals of joy. Ellie cheered them on, proud of her brothers. Rachel, tired from work but visibly happy, was preparing dinner in the tiny kitchen. It was a simple scene, the kind that happens in thousands of homes every day. But for Martin, it was a revelation. Seeing that family, who, against all odds, found reasons to smile, to keep going, he understood that he could do more, much more. "Mr. Hale, your next meeting is in 15 minutes, his assistant informed him over the intercom. "Thank you, Diana. I'll be ready." Martin turned his attention back to the documents. The foundation was no small project. It would start with a significant contribution from his personal assets. But the intention was to grow, to establish partnerships, to create a real and lasting support network. There were plans for a professional training center with free childcare for the children, a housing assistance program, scholarships, legal aid for mothers who, like Rachel, had been abandoned without child support or assistance, psychological counseling, a complete structure to offer not just immediate help, but tools for independence. Martin knew it wouldn't be easy. Building skyscrapers, closing deals that he had mastered, but building futures, that was new, challenging territory. Still, he felt more excited about this project than any other in years. His phone rang. It was Rachel. "Is everything okay over there?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I just wanted to confirm you're coming to the twins' birthday party on Saturday. Ellie is planning a surprise for you." Martin smiled. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll bring the gifts we agreed on. Nothing over the top." "Thank you," Rachel said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Oh, and Greg confirmed he's coming too. I hope that's not a problem." "Not at all," Martin assured her. "He's their father." After hanging up, Martin returned to the documents. The mention of Greg made him think about how things had evolved in recent months. The man was really trying. He had a modest job, visited the children regularly, was starting to build a relationship with them. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was present. Martin felt no jealousy or rivalry. He had found his own place in that family, not as a substitute, but as a friend, a support. And now, with the foundation, he hoped to find his place in many other stories. He signed the first document, authorizing the formal creation of the entity. Then the second, the initial transfer of funds. Next, the appointment of the board of directors, people he admired for their integrity and social vision. Among the names, he had included Rachel's. When he invited her to join the board, she was surprised. "Why me? I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know more than you think," he had replied. "You know what these families need because you've been there. Your experience is worth more than any degree." After some hesitation, she had accepted. Martin smiled, remembering how her eyes had lit up when she understood she could help other women in the same situation she had been in. As he finished signing the last document, Martin stood up and walked to his office's panoramic window. Below, the city stretched out, alive and pulsing. So many stories happening simultaneously. So many Rachels, so many Ellies, so many little twins growing up in difficult circumstances. He couldn't help everyone, of course, but he could start. One clean slate at a time, just as Ellie had done that morning that changed his life. Martin remembered his childhood, the hardships he had faced, his mother working 2 jobs, the nights with an empty stomach. He remembered how he had sworn that if he ever had the means, no one else would go through what he had. Over the years, that childhood vow had been buried under layers of ambition, the pursuit of success and material achievements, until a 5-year-old girl, determined to get milk for her brothers, had reminded him of who he really was and what truly mattered. "Mr. Hale, the meeting is about to start," Diana called from the door. Martin nodded, still looking out the window. "I'm on my way." Before turning around, he smiled at his reflection in the glass. He was no longer just Martin Hale, successful businessman. He was someone who had finally found a greater purpose, a way to give back, to make a difference. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly clean on the inside. As if all the smudges he had accumulated over the years, the indifference, the detachment, the exclusive focus on himself, were being wiped away, one pane of glass at a time. And that, Martin realized, was the true wealth he had always been searching for without knowing it. A year can change a lot. The seasons passed, and with them came transformations that no one could have predicted on that morning when a little girl decided to clean the window of an expensive car. Apartment 302 in the yellow building at Hope's Landing was no longer the same. The peeling walls had received a fresh coat of paint, the old stove had been replaced, and colorful curtains now framed the windows. It wasn't luxurious. Rachel had made sure of that, refusing Martin's more extravagant offers, but it was comfortable and welcoming. A home. It was Sunday morning. early spring. Martin parked his car, no longer the flashy Porsche, but a more discreet model, and walked up the stairs with a bag of fresh bread. He no longer needed to knock. He had his own key. "Uncle Martin's here," Ellie announced as soon as he opened the door, running to hug him. At 6, she was taller, her face fuller, her eyes even more alive. "Good morning, little engineer," he greeted, referring to her new interest in building things. The week before, they had built a bridge out of craft sticks that now held a place of honor on the living room shelf. The twins, now 2 years old, followed right behind, their chubby little legs moving in still slightly clumsy steps. "Martin, Martin," they shouted in unison, unable to pronounce the R correctly. Rachel appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a cloth. Her face no longer bore the constant marks of worry and exhaustion. There was a new lightness in her movements, a different sparkle in her eyes. "You're right on time. The coffee is almost ready," she said, taking the bags. The Sunday routine had established itself naturally. Martin would show up early, bring something for breakfast, and they would spend the morning together. Sometimes Greg would join them later, an arrangement that surprised everyone with its cordiality. Other times, Martin would take the family on an outing, to the zoo, the park, a children's museum. The Clean Slate Foundation had been running for 8 months, serving families in situations similar to the one Rachel had faced. Rachel divided her time between her administrative job at Martin's company and her role as a board member at the foundation, where her personal experience had become a valuable asset. Greg, surprisingly, had also started to contribute. He helped at fundraising events and had recently begun speaking at support groups for absent fathers who wanted to return to their children's lives. His relationship with the children had gradually improved. There were still moments of distrust, especially from Ellie, but also genuine moments of connection. After breakfast, while Rachel tidied up the kitchen, Martin sat on the living room rug with the children. The twins were fascinated by a shape-sorting toy, focused on its colors and forms. "No, Tommy, the red piece goes in the red hole," Ben explained, with the surprising patience he sometimes showed. Ellie brought her sketchbook and sat down next to Martin. "Look what I made at school yesterday," she said, showing him a colorful drawing. "It's our family." Martin studied the drawing carefully. On a green lawn, under a smiling yellow sun, were 5 figures, Rachel in the center, Ellie and the twins by her side, and 2 male figures, one that clearly represented Greg, with his short hair, and another taller one, in a suit, whom Martin recognized as himself. "It's very beautiful," he praised, genuinely touched to be included in that family portrait. "My teacher asked who you were," Ellie commented, adding more details to the figures. "I told her you're our guardian angel." Martin laughed, surprised. "Guardian angel? Why?" Ellie shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "Because you showed up when we needed you most and you didn't leave." The simplicity of the explanation hit him hard. Across the room, he noticed that Rachel had stopped what she was doing and was watching them with a gentle smile. "You know," Martin said, helping Ben fit a stubborn piece, "the one who really saved me was you, Ellie." "Me?" She widened her eyes, surprised. "How did I save you?" "Before I met you, I had forgotten a lot of important things," he explained. "I was losing something inside me, but I didn't know it." "What things?" she asked, curious. Martin thought for a moment, searching for words a 6-year-old could understand. "Remember a long time ago, when you asked me if my nice car made my heart happy?" Ellie nodded, though she seemed only vaguely to remember the conversation. "Well, the truth is, it didn't. I had a lot of things, a car, a house, and money, but something was missing." He paused, adjusting Tommy, who had decided to climb onto his back. "Meeting you all made me see the world differently. It reminded me of where I came from, of the boy I used to be." Rachel came closer, sitting on the sofa. "What boy was that?" she asked softly. Martin looked at her, then at the children. A boy who believed he could change things, who cared about people, who knew that having a family, even if it's not a traditional one, is the greatest treasure anyone can have. "And you forgot all that?" Ellie asked, now fully interested. "For a while," Martin admitted. "I got so busy building things, making money, that I forgot why I wanted to do it all in the first place. I forgot about that hungry little boy who swore that one day he would make a difference. Tommy had climbed all the way up his back and was now hanging from his neck, laughing. Martin adjusted the boy onto his shoulders, holding his little legs. "When you cleaned my car window that day," he continued, "it was like you also cleaned a window inside of me. A window that had been dirty for so long that I didn't even notice anymore." "And now you see better?" Ellie asked, with the peculiar wisdom that sometimes emerged in her words. Martin smiled, a full smile that reached his eyes. "Now I see everything much better." The morning continued peacefully. Later, Greg showed up to take the twins for an outing, part of the arrangement they had established. The boys ran excitedly to the door. Ellie, more reserved, decided to stay home, helping Rachel prepare lunch while Martin fixed a loose shelf. It was an ordinary, simple scene, with nothing extraordinary about it, and perhaps that was exactly what made it so special. In the afternoon, as Martin was getting ready to leave, he paused for a moment by the living room window. The late afternoon sun streamed in, creating golden patterns on the floor. From where he stood, he could see the whole room. Rachel reading a story to Ellie on the sofa, the twins' toys organized in their basket, the photographs on the wall, new and old, creating a timeline of smiles and captured moments. It wasn't his house, not his family in the traditional sense. And yet, it was his home in many ways that mattered. Somewhere between cleaning windows and simple dinners, between feverish nights and modest birthdays, between foundation meetings and Sunday afternoons, Martin Hale, the poor boy who became a rich and lonely man, had finally found what he had been unknowingly looking for: belonging, purpose, love. Purpose. Not the romantic love from the movies, but something equally powerful. The love that emerges when broken souls meet and together discover they can still create something beautiful. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Ellie asked, interrupting his thoughts. Martin looked at her expectant little face, and then at Rachel, who was watching them with a serene smile. "Always," he replied. And he knew with absolute certainty that it was a promise he would never break. Because finally, after searching in the wrong place for so long, Martin Hale had found true wealth, not in possessions or achievements, but in the light that now shone, clear and constant, through the window of his soul. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.